I sat at the corner of the long mahogany table, the only seat no one bothered to touch. It was always like this. The parts of the family photo that didn't fit were quietly pushed to the edges. And that's where they placed Grandpa and me. The room glowed with money. Crystal chandeliers dripping with light. Guests wrapped in luxury fabrics. The kind of smiles that were trained, not sincere. The air carried the scent of rosemary roasted meat and imported chocolates. But beneath it all was something sour. Pretense. I glanced at Grandpa. His old brown sweater, worn collar, and soft eyes clashed with everything in this glittering villa. Yet he was the only person in this entire house whose presence grounded me. He leaned closer, voice low. "Jack, I'm really happy you came." I swallowed the tightness in my throat. "If you ask, I show up, always." Before I continue, tell, from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. Before Grandpa could speak, my father's voice erupted across the room, loud, polished, theatrical. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dad announced, raising his wine glass like a trophy. "Thank you for joining us tonight." Another year of success for the Briggs family. Another year of growth, a ripple of applause. Cameras from guests' phones flashed. Dad thrived on attention like a plant on sunlight. He continued, "Our family has always valued ambition, dedication, hard work. And I am proud to say," he glanced knowingly toward me, "some of us still honor those values." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. They knew exactly who he meant, and so did I. Grandpa stiffened. "Larry," he warned softly, but Dad kept going, fueled by the crowd. "It's disappointing," he said, swirling his wine, "when certain members of the family choose smaller lives, lesser paths, like working as a cook in some rundown diner, instead of contributing to the Briggs legacy." Mom chimed in, voice coated with sugar but sharp like glass. "Larry, don't embarrass him," she said theatrically, as if she hadn't been waiting for this moment all night. "This is Christmas. Let's keep things pleasant." I felt my jaw clench. I hadn't said a single word since entering the house. Yet somehow I was already the problem. Jack was invited because Dad insisted, Mom added, giving Grandpa a polite, empty smile. "But this night is important for us. We can't have unnecessary tension." Unnecessary tension. That was what my existence reduced to. Grandpa slowly stood up, placing his hand on his cane. The room hushed, waiting. "Larry," he said, voice quiet but razor sharp. "You forget yourself," Dad scoffed. "Dad, sit down. Please don't start drama." "You humiliated my grandson," Grandpa said. "In your own home." "On Christmas. It's my house," Dad snapped. "And I won't have either of you bringing negativity into my event." "If you can't behave, then leave," a couple gasped. Someone swallowed hard. The insult hovered in the air like frost. Mom added in her practiced, icy tone, "Yes, maybe it's better if you go. This is a sophisticated gathering. We can't accommodate everyone, meaning us." Grandpa looked at me, and his expression broke something in my chest. Not anger, not hurt, resignation. He lifted his chin. "Come, Jack." I rose from my chair in complete silence. My hands trembled, but not from shame. From the realization that tonight, I finally saw my parents without the gold, without the lights, without the performance, and I didn't like what was underneath. "Grandpa," whispered, "we don't need to stay where we aren't wanted." We walked toward the door, every eye in the room following us, some curious, some judgmental, none compassionate. Dad called from behind, "Merry Christmas." "Jack," it wasn't a wish, it was a dismissal. Grandpa pushed open the door, the cold winter air rushing in, and before we stepped out into the dark, he leaned toward me and said something I'd never forget. "Don't worry, Jack. They have no idea who they've just thrown out." The cold hit us like a wall the moment the door shut behind us. The laughter and clinking glasses from inside were suddenly nothing more than a faint echo. A world we no longer belonged to. Grandpa gripped his cane a little tighter, steady but breathing heavier than usual. I moved closer, shielding him from the wind cutting through his thin sweater. "You okay?" I asked softly. He gave a faint smile. "I've walked through worse winters with less dignity left. I'll survive." We made our way down the stone steps toward the driveway, our shadows stretching long across the snow-dusted pavement. My old car sat at the far end, looking embarrassingly out of place among the guests. Luxury sedans and custom SUVs. For a moment, we simply stood there, the glow of the mansion behind us, and the quiet hum of the night ahead. "Jack," Grandpa said suddenly, "before we leave." "Thank you. For what?" I asked, baffled. "For not becoming like them." His voice trembled. Not from the cold, but from something heavier. Years of watching his own son turn into a man he barely recognized. A man shaped more by wealth than by love. We got into the car, and the seats groaned under our weight. The heater sputtered before slowly breathing warm air. Grandpa rubbed his hands together as I started driving. Down the long hill, halfway through the descent, he spoke again. "You know, I need to tell you something tonight." "About what?" "Everything," he said simply. We reached the main road, and the city stretched out before us, lights twinkling like scattered pieces of hope. I stole a glance at him. His eyes weren't tired. They were determined. "Jack," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Your father thinks I'm poor." "They all do. They think I retired with scraps and savings. That's what they always made it sound like," I admitted. He shook his head with a soft sigh. "I let them believe it. I let everyone believe it, except your grandmother. God rest her soul." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Why?" I whispered. "Why pretend?" "Because I wanted to see who people truly were when they believed I had nothing to give them," he said. "Money blinds, it spoils. It reveals ugly truths." We passed a cluster of houses glowing with Christmas lights. Children ran around in front yards, bundled in coats, faces full of joy, the kind we hadn't felt in years. Grandpa continued, "Your father was different when he was young. Ambitious, smart, hard-working. But when the hotel chain grew and the money poured in, he changed. Harlow changed with him. Appearance became everything." He looked at me. "You, Jack, you never cared for any of that. You chose your own life, not the one they tried to script for you." My throat tightened. "Grandpa, what are you trying to tell me?" He exhaled slowly, as if releasing a secret he'd been carrying for decades. "Jack, I'm not the man they think I am. I am not broke. I am not dependent on them. And I am definitely not someone to be thrown out of a house like a burden." The heater hummed, filling the silence. I stared at him. "Then who are you?" He looked straight ahead at the road, and with a calm, almost quiet conviction, he said, "The truth is, I own more than your father's hotel chain could dream of. Stocks, land, properties, investments. I built a parallel empire long before your father tasted success. No one knows, not even him." My breath caught. "Grandpa, are you saying—" "Yes, Jack," he interrupted softly. "I'm a billionaire, and they have no idea." The world seemed to tilt. The darkness outside suddenly felt electric. I could barely speak. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because tonight," he said, voice steady, "you stood beside me when everyone else pushed me aside. I needed to know who I could trust with the truth. And it's you." I slowed the car as we approached a red light. The streets were quiet, peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. A billionaire. My grandfather, the man in an old sweater, was a secret billionaire. He placed a hand on my arm. "And Jack, everything I've built, everything I've hidden, is meant for someone worthy." The light turned green. Someone like you. Didn't speak for nearly a full minute. My brain kept trying to fit the image of Grandpa. The frayed sweater, the patched elbows, the soft voice, into the word billionaire. It didn't match. It didn't compute. It felt like trying to fit two different realities into one human being. Finally, I managed, "Grandpa, why hide this from them?" "From anyone." He smiled faintly, looking out the window at the blur of Christmas lights. "Because power attracts parasites, but humility attracts truth." We drove past a small bakery closing for the night. A man wiped the counters, a woman stacked trays, both laughing about something simple, something real. Grandpa watched them with a kind of longing. "I didn't want a life where people loved me for my wealth," he said. "I wanted a life where people loved me for me." Then his voice grew tighter. "Your father and mother, somewhere along the way, they forgot what kindness looks like unless it benefits their status." The words stung, but they weren't new. I'd lived the consequences of their priorities my whole life. Grandpa continued, "But you, Jack, you treat everyone the same. Wealthy, poor, strangers. Family or you see people, not value." I gave a small humorless laugh. "Well, apparently that got me thrown out of the house." "No," Grandpa said firmly. "That got you thrown out of a mansion, not a home. Homes are built on love, not chandeliers." The road wound upward as I drove, toward the small apartment where Grandpa stayed. A modest place, simple brick walls, an old mailbox. Nothing about it hinted at the kind of wealth he was describing. I helped him out of the car, one hand on his elbow. He wasn't frail, but the cold made him slower. When we reached the door, he didn't unlock it right away. Instead, he turned to me, eyes glistening beneath the porch light. "You know what hurt tonight?" he asked. I shook my head gently. It wasn't the insult, or the humiliation. I've lived long enough to brush off pettiness. He swallowed, steadying himself. What hurt was realizing that my own son, my blood, thinks of me as disposable, temporary, something to tolerate as long as I'm quiet. He exhaled deeply. And for a moment, he didn't look like a billionaire or a victim. He looked like a father who had been betrayed by his own child. I spent years wondering if I did something wrong raising him, he whispered. But tonight, I realized the truth. Some hearts don't become cold because of what they lack. They become cold because of what they worship. He finally unlocked the door, and we stepped into the apartment. It was warm, dimly lit, smelling faintly of cinnamon and old books. The furniture was plain, well used. Pictures of me as a kid sat on the shelves. Pictures Mom and Dad never displayed because they didn't fit their decor. Grandpa eased into his favorite armchair. I hung up his coat and sat across from him. He studied me for a long time. "Jack," he began slowly, "I'm telling you this because things will change soon, dramatically, and I need you ready." My chest tightened. "Ready for what?" "For the decisions I'm about to make," he said. "Decisions your father will not like. Decisions your mother will not understand. Decisions the world might question." He leaned forward, his voice steady. "I'm rewriting my will." I blinked. "Grandpa," "Let me finish," he said, raising a gentle hand. "My estate, everything I've built, everything I've kept hidden, will go to someone with character, not greed. Someone who knows the value of respect. Someone who sees me as more than a wallet." His eyes locked onto mine. "I choose you, Jack." The words hit me like a punch and a lifeline at the same time. "Me?" I whispered. "Yes." "You." I felt the weight of the moment settle over us like falling snow. Quiet, heavy, undeniable. "But Grandpa," I said carefully, "this will destroy whatever's left of my relationship with Dad, with Mom." He nodded. "Maybe, but you didn't destroy that relationship." "Jack, they did." I couldn't argue. I didn't want to. Grandpa leaned back and took a deep breath, his expression softening. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll show you everything. The accounts, the documents, the properties. My lawyers already know my intentions." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the weather. "Grandpa, why now?" He smiled gently. "Because tonight finally revealed the truth. Not about me, but about everyone else." A pause. His voice turned almost fatherly. "And because you stood beside me without knowing I had anything to offer." He reached out, placing his wrinkled hand over mine. "That is loyalty money cannot buy." And then, as if sealing the moment, he added quietly, "And when the truth comes out, Jack, your parents will realize the cost of throwing away the wrong." Man, I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Grandpa's words replayed in my head. "I choose you. Jack, I'm rewriting my will. I'm a billionaire and—" They have no idea. It felt unreal. Not the money, the trust, the weight of being chosen, the responsibility he was placing on my shoulders. By morning, the apartment was wrapped in soft winter light. Grandpa was already awake, sitting at the small kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee. One black for him, one with too much sugar for me. He still remembered. "Sit," he said. I joined him, and he slid a folder across the table. A thick one. "Open it." Inside were documents. Ledgers, account summaries, trust information, investment details. Names of companies I had never even heard of. Companies he owned pieces of. Real estate portfolios. Silent partnerships. Offshore holdings. Art collections stored in climate-controlled facilities. Gold reserves. My head spun. "Grandpa," I whispered, How did you build all this?" He gave a small, knowing smile. Slowly, quietly, without showing off. "I learned early that true wealth is safest when it's invisible." He pointed at the papers. "All of this. I kept away from your father. If he knew, he would have chased after it his entire life. He would have shaped every decision around it. I couldn't allow that." I swallowed hard. You're giving it to me? I'm giving it to the man who deserves it, he said.
Not the one who wants it. I didn't know what to say.
The room felt smaller, heavier, Grandpa noticed. Jack, I looked up. This isn't just about inheritance, he said softly. This is about protecting what matters. And right now, the only person in this family with a heart still in the right place is you. Before I could respond, there was a sudden, heavy knock at the door. 3 slow bangs, then silence, then another. 3. Grandpa and I exchanged a, "Look, that's your father," he murmured. My stomach tightened. How do you know? Because guilt makes men impatient, and arrogance makes them uninvited. Sighed and opened the door. Dad stood there in a long black coat, face tight, jaw clenched. Behind him, Mom hovered like a shadow, elegant, perfect, cold. Dad didn't wait for an invitation. He brushed past me and stormed inside, looking around the modest apartment with distaste. "Dad!" he snapped at Grandpa. "We need to talk." "No," Grandpa said calmly. "You need to apologize." "Apologize?" Dad scoffed. "Don't turn this into drama. Last night got out of hand. Let's move on." Mom added in her delicate, insincere tone, "Yes, you both misinterpreted things. We were hosting an event. You can't expect us to cater to family?" Grandpa cut in. "To respect? To basic decency?" The room went still. Dad sighed sharply. "Look, Jack is sensitive." I stepped forward. "Don't blame me for what you said." Mom lifted her chin defensively. We were under pressure. Important guests were present. You know, we have to maintain a standard. Grandpa tapped his cane lightly on the floor once. "Like a gavel. You threw us out," he said. "Not because of standards. Because of pride." Dad narrowed his eyes. "Dad, I came here because I heard you're rewriting your will." I froze. Mom's face tightened too. A flicker of panic betraying her perfect mask. Grandpa didn't react. "And?" Dad took a step forward, voice dropping into a warning tone. "And I want to make sure you're thinking clearly. Your old, vulnerable Jack is manipulating you." My fists clenched so hard my nails cut into my palms. Grandpa's eyes hardened. "A storm gathering. Manipulating me?" he repeated quietly. Dad nodded. "Yes, you've always favored him unfairly. But now you're making reckless decisions that could ruin everything we've built." Grandpa rose slowly from his chair and steady, dignified. "What you built?" Grandpa said, voice low but devastating. "You built nothing. You inherited my foundation and spent your life polishing the surface while letting the inside rot." Dad's face went red. Grandpa continued. "You treat me like a burden. You treat Jack like a failure. And you treat money like your god." Then he delivered the sentence that cracked the room in half. "My estate will not go to either of you." Mom gasped. Dad stepped forward, stunned. "What?" "It will go," Grandpa said, "to the one person who showed loyalty without knowing there was a reward." Dad's voice turned sharp, desperate. "So you're giving everything to Jack? You're choosing him over your own son?" Grandpa met his eyes, unwavering. "I am choosing the man who treats me like a father, not a bank." Silence, thick, explosive. Then, Dad did something I didn't expect. Something childish, humiliating and revealing. He lunged forward and tried grabbing the folder of documents from the table. "Dad, stop!" Mom hissed. I stepped in front of Grandpa instinctively. "Back off." Dad glared at me, breathing hard. "You think you deserve this? You think you're better than me?" "You're nothing, Jack." Grandpa raised his cane slightly. "Say one more word to my grandson like that, and I'll ensure you never see a single penny of my legacy." Dad froze. Mom's voice trembled. "Larry, let's go." But Dad wasn't finished. He pointed at Grandpa, shaking with rage. "You will regret this, both of you." And with that, he stormed out of the apartment. Mom followed, but not before giving me a look, not of anger, of fear. When the door slammed shut, the apartment fell quiet again. Grandpa sank back into his chair slowly. "And that," he said with a tired breath, "is the true face of greed." I sat beside him. He looked at me, softer now. "You saw it tonight, Jack. Your father didn't come here to mend anything. He came to protect what he worships." I nodded slowly. "And he lost it." "No," Grandpa corrected gently. "He threw it away himself." Dad's threats hung in the air, long after the apartment fell. Silent. Grandpa didn't move at first. He just sat there with his hands resting on the cane, eyes lowered, breathing slow and steady, the way someone breathes when they've finally accepted a painful truth. Sat opposite him, watching the weight of decades settle across his shoulders. "Grandpa," I began softly. He lifted his gaze, and the sadness there unsettled me more than anything. "Dad had said I knew this day would come," he murmured, "but I hoped I'd be gone before seeing my own son turn into a stranger." Leaned forward. "You did nothing wrong." He shook his head gently. "Maybe not, but that doesn't make the hurt any less real." We stayed in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for words, only presence. Then Grandpa straightened, pushing the sorrow aside, like a man clearing his desk before getting to work. "Jack," he said, his voice stronger, "there are things we must do today." "What things?" He reached for the folder and tapped it. "Finalize everything," I nodded. "I'm with you." Grandpa's lawyer's office was on the 15th floor of a glass building downtown. Sleek, cold, the opposite of Grandpa's warm world. But the moment his lawyer, Mr. Halden, spotted him in the reception area, his entire demeanor shifted into respect. "Mr. Briggs," Halden said, rising from his chair, "I was expecting your call, but not this soon. Things have changed." Grandpa replied. Halden's eyes flicked to me. "Is this the grandson?" Grandpa nodded. "This is Jack." I shook his hand. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise," Halden said, though his eyes said something else. "You're the one everything is going to." A quiet acknowledgement, an invisible shift in how I was now perceived. We entered the conference room, and Halden began laying out the paperwork. Legal language, signatures needed, documents detailing transfers, revisions to wills and trusts. It was like watching a mountain being moved stone by stone. Grandpa reviewed everything carefully. No hesitation in his voice when he spoke. "I want my son completely removed from all primary inheritance. No shares, no control, no access." Halden nodded. "Understood. And Harlow," Grandpa added quietly. "Remove her as well." I swallowed. Part of me still felt the sting of family ties, even if they were mostly broken threads now. Grandpa noticed. "Jack, compassion is noble. Blindness is not." Halden adjusted his glasses. "And for the beneficiary?" Grandpa didn't look at the papers. He looked at me. "Everything goes to Jack." Halden nodded and continued, processing the revisions. The signature lines were placed in front of Grandpa. His hand shook slightly, not from uncertainty, but age. "Take your time," I whispered. He smiled softly. "I'm not afraid of signing away something. I'm afraid I waited too long." He signed one line after another, one stroke after another. Each signature sealing a truth my parents could never undo. When he finished, Halden gathered the documents. "It's done." Grandpa exhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a moment, as if releasing years of pent-up burden. Then he turned to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're ready for this," he said. "I hope so." "You are," he affirmed. "Because you never wanted the wealth. That's why you deserve it." We walked out of the office into cold air and fading afternoon light. The city buzzed around us, cars, people, chatter. But Grandpa and I moved through it with a strange calmness. We reached the car when Grandpa stopped. "Jack," he said, "there's something else you must understand." I turned to him. "This isn't over." A chill crawled up my spine. "Your father won't accept what happened today. He will push back. He will fight. He will try to manipulate the narrative, the public, even the law, if he thinks it can save his pride." I didn't doubt it for a second. "And when he realizes he no longer has access to what he thought would be his inheritance," Grandpa added, "he will panic." I nodded slowly. "I'm ready for whatever he does." Grandpa eyed me carefully. "Good, because you'll need strength." Not anger, strength. We weren't even in the car yet when my phone buzzed. Dad calling. I stared at the screen, the vibration buzzing through my palm. Grandpa gave me a small nod. "Answer it." I did. Dad's voice came sharp, frantic and cold all at once. "Jack, I know where you went today." My pulse tightened. "You think you're clever?" Dad hissed. "You think you can steal my father from me?" "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly. "You pushed us out." He ignored it. "Listen to me very carefully. If you think that silly little stunt at the lawyer's office changes anything, you're wrong. It wasn't a stunt, I said, he shouted. He's old. He's confused. And you're manipulating him. This is elder abuse, and I'll prove it. I felt the heat rise in me. Don't twist this. You threw him out, Dad. You're a nobody, he snapped. You work in a diner, and you think you can suddenly become the heir to everything I built? You built nothing, I said quietly. Those were Grandpa's words. Not mine. He went silent. Then in a low, furious growl, he said, You'll regret crossing me. Jack, the call ended abruptly. Grandpa watched me. Expression grave but unsurprised. He's not done. Grandpa said softly. I nodded. I know. He placed a comforting hand on my arm. But neither are we. The next hours unfolded like a strange dream. One where the lights were too bright, the whispers too sharp, and everyone suddenly acted like they had known. Grandpa Rensworth all along, but unlike the guests, unlike my parents, Grandpa didn't change. He walked beside me with the same steady gait, his coat dusted with melted snow, his hand occasionally tapping my arm as if to remind me, I'm here, son. Don't drift too far from yourself. When we reached the driveway, the cold bit through the sleeves of my cheap jacket. The Bentley, Grandpa's Bentley, waited under the glowing street lamps. Black and sleek, the kind of car I had only seen in movies. But Grandpa didn't rush to get in. He looked at me first. Jack, he said quietly, I know today shook you, but sometimes people must reveal themselves for us to understand who they really are. I swallowed hard. You knew they'd react like that? A soft sigh escaped him, the kind carried by years of disappointment. I hoped they wouldn't. But your father, your mother, they built their world on appearances. And people who live by that rule crumble the moment appearance changes. I didn't want to hear excuses for them. I didn't want to hear anything that softened what they'd done. Grandpa, they threw us out. On Christmas. My voice cracked despite all the anger trying to hold it together. They didn't care where you'd sleep. They didn't care where I'd go. They only cared about the carpet. Grandpa nodded slowly. Because to them, love was decoration, not devotion. The snow started falling again. Slow, steady, silent. He opened the car door. But before getting in, he spoke again. I want you to move in with me. Jack, not out of pity. Not because of money, but because you're the only one in this family who remembered something your father forgot long ago. Family isn't a performance. I stared at him, stunned. Live with him, in his mansion, in his world. Grandpa? I don't belong there. I'm a diner cook making barely enough to afford my car's brakes. He smiled, the corners of his eyes wrinkling the way they always did when he was about to say something that mattered. Money doesn't define where you belong. Character does, and you have more of it than anyone. Sitting in that chandelier-lit prison, my throat tightened. He continued, his tone softer. You think I became what I am because of wealth? No, Jack. I became wealthy because I never let people like your parents control me. A gust of icy wind wrapped around us. But for the first time that night, I felt something warm inside me, something like worth. Then the door of my parents' house opened again. My mother stepped out first, her heels clicking against the stone steps, her glittery dress shimmering even more under the snow. My father followed her, stiff, tense, the kind of expression people wear when their kingdom suddenly feels threatened. Dad! Dad, wait! My mother called out, her voice desperate but shaky. It's freezing. Come back inside, please. We didn't know. My father tried to look composed, but his eyes glistened with panic. Father, he said, voice trembling between anger and desperation. We had no idea you still had business, or wealth. You thought I was too old to matter. Grandpa finished for him. You thought the man who built the Briggs name was now just a burden. My mother flinched. My father swallowed. Hard. Grandpa's voice stayed calm, but each word hit like a hammer. Tonight, you didn't throw out a poor old man. You threw out the man who built the ground you two are standing on. And you threw out the only son in this family who still understands what dignity means. My chest tightened. Called me that, son, not grandson, son. My parents looked at me like I had suddenly become someone powerful, someone valuable, but it was too late. Grandpa opened the Bentley's back door. Jack, he said gently. Let's go. I walked toward him. Without looking back, not once, my parents kept calling after us, but their voices echoed into the cold and vanished among the falling snow. When I slid into the warm leather seat beside Grandpa, he squeezed my shoulder. "Tonight," he whispered, "was your beginning. Not your end." The car pulled away from the mansion I had spent my life trying, failing to belong to. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was headed somewhere I was actually wanted. The drive to Grandpa's estate was quiet, not awkward, not heavy, just quiet in the way snowfall is quiet when it settles over the world, making everything feel new. City lights faded behind us, replaced by the silhouettes of tall pines and sloping hills. When the gates of his mansion emerged from the darkness, iron and gold twisting into the shape of soaring wings, I felt myself exhale a breath. I didn't know I'd been holding. The place didn't look like wealth, it looked like peace, like someone lived there, not performed there. The Bentley rolled to a stop. A valet hurried out, but Grandpa raised a hand. "Go inside." "Son," he told me softly, "this home is yours before it is anyone else's." I stepped into a foyer, lined with warm lights, old portraits, wooden floors polished with history. Nothing sparkled like the artificial glitter of my parents' mansion. Everything here felt lived in, real. For the first time in years, I felt safe. But Grandpa wasn't finished. He led me to his study, oak shelves, fireplace crackling, an old globe in the corner, and closed the door behind us. "Jack," he said as he sat down slowly, "I brought you here tonight for more than shelter." I looked at him, unsure. He took out a folder, a thin, worn, faded folder, and placed it on the desk between us. "This," he said, "belongs to you." My heart thudded. I opened it. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Documents, signatures, property deeds, shares, an entire ledger of investments in my name. In your name? But how, why? Grandpa leaned back, hands folded over his cane. "Your father. He lost himself in ambition, in image. He forgot the meaning of legacy. I couldn't trust him with mine. Not anymore. I watched him build palaces on credit and ego. I watched him forget the people who shaped him." He paused, eyes steady on mine. I wasn't going to let what I created die in his hands. My breath grew shallow. "You trusted me instead." He smiled. "From the moment you stood up for that server at your father's hotel 2 years ago, when they spilled a drink and your father humiliated him, I knew. You had something he didn't. Heart." I swallowed hard. I remembered that incident, barely, but Grandpa remembered the way people remember things that matter. "You're different, Jack," he said quietly. "You may not have their money, but you have something far rarer. A soul untouched by greed." I blinked back, a sting in my eyes. Grandpa took a slow breath. "I'm naming you my heir." Those words didn't feel real at first. They felt like fiction, like the kind of thing that happens to someone else. "Grandpa, I'm just a chef at a small diner." "And that," he said firmly, "is exactly why I trust you with everything. You work, you create, you feed people. You understand value, real value, not the kind stapled to labels and price tags." A silence hovered between us, warm and meaningful. "Whatever you choose to do with my fortune," Grandpa added, "I want it to bring you happiness, not weight. And I want you to promise me one thing." I nodded. "Anything. Never become Larry." His voice didn't shake. "Never forget kindness for the sake of status." I felt my chest tighten. "I won't. I promise." He smiled, a slow, proud smile. "Good." 2 days later, when the truth leaked online, when the Briggs Hotel group discovered their founder had cut them out of everything, my parents tried calling, then texting, then begging. I didn't pick up, not out of spite, out of closure. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. Grandpa and I sat together on his back porch, sipping hot cocoa, watching the snow pile onto the pines. "You know," he murmured with a grin, "I've always wanted to open a restaurant again. A real one. Not those soulless hotel kitchens." I looked at him. "A restaurant? You and me? Why not?" He chuckled. "You're the chef. I'm the wallet." I laughed, really laughed. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like possibility. And as the sun dipped behind the snowy hills, Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder. "Jack," he said, "this Christmas wasn't the one you expected, but it was the one you needed." I nodded. Slowly, because he was right. I came to my parents' house out of obligation, but I left with a family, a real one, and for the first time in my life, wealth didn't intimidate me. It empowered me because it came from love, not bloodline, not status, not greed, but love.